Oh, hey, Lily.
Hey, Cole.
What's been going on?
Just the usual. Watching Star Trek, drinking wine.
Always.
Reading some feedback from the fans.
So glad to see that people are enjoying our conversation with David Livingston as much as we did, or at least nearly as much.
Nearly as much. I think it was peak enjoyment.
Hard to top it. Well, we've got part 2 queued up now, and it's another doozy.
Oof. I've never heard doozy used in the context of something good. Is that a thing?
Oh. You know when Charlie Brown is at the pitcher's mound and the ball is slugged back and it somehow inexplicably knocks his shirt off? You know what I'm talking about?
I don't, but it's so folksy, so keep going.
I feel like talking with David Livingston, we would pitch him a question and he would lob an answer back to us and just knock our socks off with his answer.
Yeah. Oh, and look at that seamless baseball metaphor. Do you watch Deep Space Nine? So we talk a little bit about the Nagus, and that brings us to how David got in touch with us. He reached out to us over Instagram after listening to our episode of the Nagus. And
that reminds me, what's our Instagram handle? I forget.
Deep Space Wine _podcast is our Instagram.
Thank you for reminding me. Deep Space Wine _podcast.
Yeah, and I post a lot of stories of wine content and Deep Space Nine content, if you can imagine that.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, so there was a message in the inbox and it was from David Livingston and I could not believe it. I thought it was a prank. And I immediately got in touch with you and you had a similar experience.
Yeah.
I believe I asked you, is 8-year-old Cole peeing his pants with excitement?
And I believe my answer was no, 38-year-old Cole is peeing his pants with excitement.
Yeah. Oh, cute. And just to assure you all, no pants were actually peed in. It's a metaphor.
Good clarification.
And then we wrangled him into being on the podcast, of which this is part 2.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We get into a lot of the characters. Turns out we owe David Livingston a great debt of gratitude for getting Avery Brooks cast as Cisco, for example.
That's
just
right.
Another way he's an unsung hero. And then I think my favorite part of this part of the interview was Best Friends Club, where we all talk about our favorite character relationships on the show.
Yes, and we discuss who our favorite Best Friends Club is. And I'm pretty sure by the end of the interview, there was another little Best Friends Club happening, and it was Lily, Cole, and David.
Oh, step aside, Jake and Nog.
And then I think, look, I don't want to jump the gun on this, but maybe we paved the way for another potential Best Friends Club, which is Lily, Cole, and Armin Shimmerman. I don't know. I'm putting it out there.
We're ready to talk Shakespeare and Ferengis and everything in between whenever you want. You know our Instagram, deepspacewine _podcast.
Correct. Oh my God, it's going to be amazing.
So without further ado, part 2 with David Livingston.
So, David, if we can briefly talk about your directing on the Nagus, because we were so thrilled to get your response to our podcast discussion of the episode. And not only did you direct the episode, but you also have a writing credit as well on this. Is that right?
Through the graciousness of Ira Bear, I pitched a story about all of these heavyweight aliens coming to the station and Quark dealing with some kind of business issue. They didn't like that part of the story very much. What they did like, and they bought the story from me, about Jake teaching Nog how to read. They liked that story. And Ira was able to combine them. So it was all of a Ferengi-centric episode. And Ira didn't have to give me story credit. He certainly should have taken co-story credit. But he was very gracious, and I was still a producer on the show. And I've seen him many times over the past couple of decades, and I thanked him for that. But a little bit of ego boost. I'm the only person to have ever gotten a producer, writing, and directing credit on an episode.
It's amazing.
Which means nothing except, vanity.
Well, you did. I think the Jake and Nog storyline is the heart of the episode. It's one of the most touching moments from season 1. So that came from you. I think you need to take credit for that. No, absolutely.
I do. I recognize my son was 11, 10 or 12 at the time, and it resonated. And my son used to visit the set and he would pal around with these guys. Sirach and he became kind of buddies. Aaron was older. Aaron, bless his heart, is deceased. But what a delightful human being. But Brian, my son, would come and he'd hang out with Sirach and pal around and stuff. And that kid stuff really, it touched me. And it just came into my head. One interesting thing is, I told you they didn't know what to do with the businessman story. I got to go to the story break, which is where the writers have a big whiteboard and they write with a erasable black pen the beats and the scenes. And it's an amazing experience, because I'm not a writer, to see the whole episode happened in about an hour and a half, and it's all right there. But they couldn't figure out what to do with the businessman part. And Michael Piller, I'll never forget it, he said, why don't we do The Godfather? And everybody in the room lit up. Yeah, let's do The Godfather. And Michael turns to Ira Bear and says, Ira, write The Godfather. And over the weekend, Ira wrote The Godfather and handed it to me on Monday. And I died and went to heaven. The Godfather is one of the great, Godfather 1 and 2 are two of the greatest films ever made. Talk about family. It's a movie about family. It's not a gangster movie. It's a movie about family. And that's what we did. We did an episode about family where one brother is going to kill the other brother. Well, how much more dramatic is that? So I was giddy. It was one of those shows where I couldn't wait to get to the set each day to go into that world. Yeah. It was so there for me. And I felt so in touch and excited. And it was funny. It was a comedy. The Frankie are the goofiest characters ever created. But I don't think you can take your eyes off them in that episode because they're doing all these machinations, which are so human. I've said this before. To me, Ferengis are more reflective of humans as we are today than anybody else on the station. They're the true reflections of current day humanity with all the warts. That's maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but I love Ferengis. Armin Shimmerman is a dear friend. I love Ferengis.
Yeah.
And Ira created with the rules of acquisition, actually started earlier. He wrote a whole book about the rules. There's 200 and something, whatever. But Ira knew the Ferengi better than anybody, and he wrote the heck out of them. So thank you, Ira, for the Nagus and for Rules of Acquisition. Two really terrific episodes.
Amazing episodes.
Yeah. I think so.
Okay, Lily, what was this rumor you heard about the Nagus as a name, right?
Yeah, so I read this somewhere. I think it was on a message board somewhere that your nickname became the Nagus. I think I was reading that Marvin Rush started calling you the Nagus on set.
Yes. Oh, you're absolutely right. Yes, he did. Yeah, Marvin and I had a fraught relationship.
Oh, gosh.
It was tough because I would put him into lighting situations where he couldn't put the lights because I would do a lot of fancy stuff with the camera. And he thought that I wasn't being responsible. And I made him work. but he always delivered.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with him a year or so ago, and we talked about it. And I said, I know I made things difficult for you. And he said, yeah, you did. But he said, the work was worth it. And that meant a lot to me. I was not the favorite director of the crew or the cast that I worked with. But sometimes Kate Mulgrew on Voyager and I had a very, very difficult relationship. But on the last day that I directed, she called me into her trailer and said, I know we've had our discussions, but I just want to tell you that the work was good. And coming from Kate Mulgrew, who is a really tough personality, that meant a lot. And I'm not trying to stroke myself or anything, but again, it's gratifying to know that even though I drove people crazy, that the work got recognized, and take that to the bank.
Yes.
I think the results speak for themselves, really.
Yes.
I mean,
she saw that and we saw that.
Yeah.
Okay, as long as we're talking about The Godfather, I mean, clearly everyone behind the scenes are also big film buffs, like we are. You even recreated the entire opening scene of The Godfather in the Nagus. It was like a shot for shot. So the film buff in me was just nerding out. You had the blinds behind Quark in space, which I think is hilarious. You had the turn of his hand, just the way Marlon Brando does. The attention to detail really impressed me when I looked closely.
There's no time to prep anything. But at the production meeting, you can ask you certain things. So in the production meeting, we were talking about the set for Quark in his quarters or wherever, his office. I don't know what it was. And I said, I would like blinds on the window. Rick Berman turns to me like this. He could be very stern. He says, we don't have blinds in space. And I turned to him and I said, and this is in front of a room of 20 people. And he's reprimanding me. He says, we don't have blinds in this place. I turned to him and I said, Rick, we're doing The Godfather. And he takes a beat. He takes another beat. He takes another beat. Okay. He liked to humor me. He says, okay, you can have your blinds. That was the first thing. And then we don't have time to prep scenes and stuff. So when we got to the scene, I had a cassette of the opening shot of The Godfather, and I showed it to everybody. I showed it to Marvin, and I said, Marvin, this is Gordon Willis, and his deal is to top light everything so that you don't see into the eyes and that you have all these shadows and you really don't see a lot that's going on. And can you do that? He says, yeah, I'll do that. So he lit it it's still brighter than Gordon Willis, but still, it's Gordon Willis style of lighting. I showed Armin the opening shot of The Godfather and asked him to recreate Brando's movement, especially in light of him having these incredibly big ears, which made that movement even goofier and funny.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I asked Michael Westmore, I said, Michael Westmore, I need an alien cat, because in the opening shot of The Godfather, Brando's petting his cat.
Sure.
So we needed a creature. So Michael said, yeah, I got something we can use. So we had a puppeteer there to work the cat. So, and then I showed Marvin the pullback. And I said, Marvin, let's just do that shot. So it was a shot starting on the guy in the chair. And he's talking about wanting to get favors from The Godfather. And we pull back over and you don't know it's Quark yet until he does the Brando gesture. And then we pull out and see him in all his glory against the shuttered windows. So, yeah, that's the genesis of all that. But I wrote it. If they write it, you got to shoot it. I mean, come on. How any other director, you're going to do that shot. He didn't say to do that shot. It's not in the script to do that shot, but you do that shot. It's a no-brainer.
By the way, Lily's kind of looking like the Nagus / Marlon Brando right now. You've got those blinds behind you, looking very intimidating.
Do. That's
Thank
cool.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Not intentional. I just rent a house that was built in the 70s. Actually, my cat almost jumped up on my lap before I should have let it happen. That would be an amazing organic moment. But.
Okay, there was one more thing I wanted to ask about the Nagus and The Godfather, because Lily and I love seeing the source material in episodes like that and seeing how it comes through in the final episode. And we really ran with The Godfather in our episode discussion on the podcast, and realizing that it was this Godfather homage made us see the Ferengi as the Italian-American immigrants on the station.
Absolutely.
Right? And then that really helped us connect the A plot and the B plot, of course, when Jake is teaching Nog how to read, because suddenly Sisko is trying to keep his son away from the son of immigrants, from a disreputable family. But turns out Jake is helping Nog read and integrate into society. And it was just this amazing moment when we saw how those complemented each other. So I have to ask you, you were the one who had pitched that reading story too. Did you see the A and B stories complementing each other like that, or in some other ways when you were either pitching it or directing it?
Well, when I read the script, yeah.
Okay.
And bottom line is, Sisko was a racist.
Yeah.
And Avery Brooks is as far away from a racist as any human being could possibly be.
Sure.
But he played the hell out of it. But it was racist. He was not accepting of that other culture. And there was some justification for his point of view because they gave him a lot of trouble, at least traditionally. And he, out of the mouths of babes, his son had to teach him a life lesson. And that's one of the magic parts of the episodes that the father learned from the son. And that's the core heart to the episode. The moment when Sisko walks in and he sees it happening, that look on Avery's face, he doesn't tell you a lot, but he tells you enough. And then the last scene when he ruffles his son's hair and says, "Go," I'm getting a chill thinking about it because it's impactful for me. "Go off and be with your friend." And he uses the word friend. And that's what Star Trek could capture on occasion. And we had the kind of characters and actors and situations and conflict that could pull that off.
And I think what you've said about what you like about Deep Space Nine, that play between the love and hate within the dynamics, within the characters, is so
everybody
important.
hates and loves each other at the same time on the show. They're always in conflict. And that's the magic of the show because it's life. We all have issues, but they're forced into this claustrophobic, literally, world. It's Gunsmoke. It's not Wagon Train.
Right.
And that forces the people into situations that they would normally not be in. Frankies would be off on their own planet. They wouldn't want to be dealing with humans. Why? They want to make profit and get a lot of Latinum. So.
It's this Western outpost where all sorts of different characters converge and have to interact with each other and survive together out on this frontier.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that take. Gosh, we invited you here to talk about The Storyteller, so maybe we can move on to that because we watched it and we both love it. It has this epic myth-like quality and felt like Deep Space Nine's biggest show up to that point. I mean, you were basically telling a monster folk tale. The Dalrock scenes especially were very impressively directed. They had big coordination of extras, set pieces, special effects. Was it as hard to put together as it looks?
The hardest part of the show was when we were doing the Dalrock scenes, we had to use these big wind machines. And the motors on them and the wind itself makes a lot of noise. And you couldn't hear anything. And I had to use a bullhorn to direct the scenes when that was happening, because otherwise nobody could hear me. It was an ego trip to use a bullhorn. I felt like an old-time Hollywood director speaking through the megaphone. But that was hard. And it was hard on everybody because all that air rushing around and the noise and stuff is very enervating. And it sucks the energy out of you. And I had to keep pumping myself up to be able to pump up everybody to understand what the stakes were. The stakes were very high. It was their survival. They all had to be on the same page. And you're dealing with extras. Extras don't usually do the kind of stuff they did in this episode. They had to act. Usually they're walking back and forth. They'd have no connection to the scene. These extras were integrated into the story and critical because you couldn't just have 4 actors there. You have to have the sense that there is a village and that the cohesiveness of the village will finally save themselves because of what they can do with their telepathic abilities or whatever. And again, the job was to keep everybody on the up and up.
David, that's so incredibly meta, that story about the storyteller. In the episode, we're trying to decide who the storyteller is. And I think the storyteller was probably the director of the episode. The idea of you pumping up the extras, getting them excited.
Yeah, David's the Syrah, giving everyone the motivational speech. That's perfect.
Well, that is pretty meta. My only direction at the beginning of every take was energy or go faster. Instead of saying action, energy. If they're not invested, are you going to be invested watching? No, you care less if they're la-di-da.
Yeah. Have you watched it recently, The Storyteller?
I did watch it probably within the past couple of months. And I got to tell you, I got a huge kick because I forgot how much fun it was. But it's the interaction between Bashir and O'Brien. And that was the beginning of their relationship. Don't call me sir. And their interplay is brilliant timing. My favorite moment in the show is when Bashir is eating an apple and he's calm and collected and nothing bothering him or anything. And life is a bowl of cherries or a delicious apple. And Bashir is walking back and forth in the frame, absolutely insane about how am I going to deal with this? And Bashir could give a royal rats. So now Armin Shimmerman, because I talked to Armin about, I've heard him comment about that scene. And he says, I don't think David directed that scene properly. He said, there should have been coverage on O'Brien to see O'Brien's struggle. And I'm saying, wow, that's not funny. What's funny is to see the guy eating an apple while the other guy is in torment. That's
totally.
Otherwise, it would have been, Strum and Drong. I don't need that. I'm like, they were funny together. And if you don't go for the comedy, it's dry and why? So I was pleased with that. I like that.
Good.
I mean, that scene might have even been the start of their friendship because you see Julian learning how to poke fun at O'Brien. And then that dynamic plays out for 7 seasons. So you see them both sort of loosen up.
Bashir was treated as a dandy initially, which was a really bad call. And in that scene, he has an insouciance about him that he hadn't had before. He was much too serious, much too bug up his ass, and much too, he was a dilettante. And that's not Sid. You got to write to the person you have, but also write an interesting character.
Yes.
Bashir was not interesting. At least I don't remember seeing all the other episodes, but in this episode, to me, he became interesting. He started off as a pain in the ass, and he evolved as a character, at least in relationship to O'Brien. And I thought that was wonderful. And Bashir became an integral, essential part of the cast and wasn't just a second banana player.
Lily, you had this realization about what happens to Bashir in the episode.
I think that we discuss in the podcast that this is the redemption arc for the character of Bashir. Because, as you say, previously he is incredibly unlikable, participating in some quite creepy behavior with the women and, just not likable at all. And this is the beginning of his redemption arc where he kind of looks outside of himself and sees that there are other people having complex lives. And previous to that, it's like that isn't something that factors into his character.
It's interesting in terms of writing and when you cast, they finally found a voice for Bashir. And I'm going to give you another example, and that's Avery Brooks. Michael Piller wanted us to consider African Americans for the part. Do you know this story about the evolution of Cisco?
No.
Michael Piller said he wanted to consider African American actors for the part of Cisco. I went to Junie Lowry and said, I had done a movie of the week as a production manager for Showtime, and we did a version of Uncle Tom's Cabin, and Avery Brooks played Uncle Tom. And his performance was devastating. So I recommended him to Junie Lowry, the casting director. She says, I think he was on the list or something, but he's in the Caribbean on vacation. And I looked at her and I said, Junie, here's a man that could audition for a show that could last 7 years and give him financial security for the rest of his life and 7 straight years of work. Do you think he's not going to want to read a script on his vacation? So she said to me, okay, I'll send him the script. He got the job. Parenthetically, at the wrap, Avery, as you see Cisco, and I'm going to get to the point I'm trying to make about Cisco.
Take your time.
He's not one to be easy to talk to or to hand out compliments or any. He's tough. He's a really tough read. But he pulled me aside at the wrap party and he said, I want to thank you for recommending me for Deep Space Nine.
Wow.
It could have been my best friend telling me that, and it wouldn't mean one iota of what somebody like Avery Brooks said to me. But that was Avery. He's a magnificent personality. He had a one-man show of Paul Robeson where he sings a lot of the stuff that Robeson sang. Paul Robeson was he was basically run out of the country because he was a supposed communist. And it's a terrible story, but he was a magnificent creature. And Avery has this magnificent performance of him. So that's Avery Brooks. We start the season and it's not working. There's something about Cisco. There's a disconnect. It's not only in the character, but it's also in the relationship to the show. It's not happening. It's not gelling. And the fault was not Avery. The fault was the writers. They were not writing to the actor that they had. They didn't write to him. And Avery was the exact right choice for the show because he imbued the whole surus and angst and I'll say darkness and trauma. His wife gets killed in the pilot.
I know.
And he's left with his son to raise. That stuff, they abandoned. They didn't play. They didn't go to his strengths. They finally did. And it's magic. When Avery started being able to play himself, it changed all the dynamics. And how they wrote for him with his son, it's the most moving stuff on the show. Without it, it would be soulless. So it's a primer for writing to the character, but also writing to the actor that has to play the character. And ultimately, that's what they found out about Bashir. And write to him. Write to who we have standing on the stage floor, not for something in our heads. You want another story? You have time?
Yes.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
We were casting Odo.
Yes.
Michael Piller, who created the character of Odo and wrote it, his template was John Wayne or Matt Dillon. We brought up Gunsmoke.
Yes.
Well, that's who he wrote.
Okay.
Okay. We're casting Odo. Rene Aubergenois, who ends up playing Odo, walks into the casting session. Before he opened his mouth, Rick Berman, who I was sitting next to, kicked me under the table. And I looked over at him and I said, yeah. He didn't even open his mouth. But Odo stood there. He was an effete, prissy, above it all, the absolute 180-degree opposite of John Wayne. He was not John Wayne. He was an effete, prissy guy. Mm-hmm. Come on, what do you look at? You mean you're looking up, Cole, like I'm not telling you something?
Well,
it's the opposite of John Wayne. He didn't want Rene. He railed against it. He fought Rick over and over. He's not who I wrote. Well, when magic walks into the room, you buy it. So it was one of those things where a writer had an idea that he wanted, Marshall Dillon walking in and doing the John Wayne routine. Cole, do you see the difference?
Okay, I mean, I was nodding because Odo is that lone sheriff. He's that Western sheriff, that gruff, repressed, all internal emotions, like a John Wayne. But of course, Rene comes in with this vulnerability that you start getting from episode 2. And that's what makes audiences fall in love with him. He's hard on the outside, but he's soft and gooey on the inside, and you can tell. And I don't think John Wayne ever gave us that.
Well, have you ever seen The Searchers?
A long time ago.
Well, the John Ford movie, one of the great scenes. Can I tell you about that?
Please.
Yeah. Natalie Wood plays a woman who is kidnapped by Native Americans, and he has to go rescue her. When he rescues her, he picks her up in his arms, and he is so racist toward Native Americans and the fact that they had killed a lot of his friends and he'd killed a lot of them. And now he's holding what he considers a half-breed. And in that moment, John Wayne you don't know whether or not he's going to squeeze her to death or comfort her. And it's John Wayne's greatest moment where he revealed his empathy and his rage all in that. It's love and hate again in that one moment. So I take exception to you saying about John Wayne. But are you telling me that John Wayne was prissy? And
no.
And I mean, Lily, help me out here. He's not John Wayne.
He is not John Wayne.
I think he's in a feat with its air of superiority. He's a changeling. Yeah. After all, the changelings are going to take over the world.
Okay, Lily and I were debating. It's so interesting how Odo is a shapeshifter, but he's also so rigid. And maybe it's irony, or maybe I get it wrong. I see Odo as this very robotic, the way he holds his arms, and he really doesn't want to let anything out. Lily, what do you think?
Okay, so I guess what I get from the character of Odo is that it's not a typical depiction of masculinity for the actor, Rene. He's not embodying masculinity in the way that, well, I suppose the typical American John Wayne archetype exists. Yeah. So I think maybe
he's not
that's sort of the heart of it. Yeah, but I think that Cole is also sort of correct in this idea that he is embodying one element of this idea of the American masculine sort of cowboy encapsulation of what it is to be a man, which is to be alone.
Yeah, he certainly has the strength.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he is the constable, so he's got to have those qualities. I'm just saying that how he portrays that character. Again, he walked into the room and he had, I'll help you out here a little bit, Cole. When he walked in, he was Odo. Forget about the John Wayne and anything else. It's that his persona, he prepared himself as Odo. And that's the key to auditions. He came in as Odo and he didn't have to open his mouth. But writers get these things in their head where they see something different and it's beaten up against a brick wall. But thankfully, Rick won the day and Rene was cast.
Look, I just had to Google the definition of effete because maybe I had it wrong. Affected and overly refined. And I like that take on Odo, this overly refined constable.
Yeah. But he does smile some. He smiled in an episode I did.
He smiles in The Storyteller. He smiles in The Storyteller.
Is that it? Okay.
So far, he's smiled twice. We're 14 episodes in, and he's only smiled at children.
Yeah.
And I think that was Renee's choice.
Which it's a great reflection of his character because inside of him, he's mush. Literally mush. And I mean, he goes into a bucket. I mean, come on. So it's that richness and layered nature of all of the characters on Deep Space Nine. They all reached that point, and the writers gave them that canvas to play on. That's what made the show magic. The Next Generation, Rick took me off directing. I directed 2 of them, and then he said he wanted me to stay on Deep Space Nine because that was his baby, and I was his boy toy or whatever, and he wanted me to he wanted me to do my thing and help out from a production standpoint. But they were all goody two shoes, and I did the one episode where they weren't goody two shoes, and Data tries to kill Picard. That's good. But that was not the normal case on The Next Generation. Just too much goodness. Too much goodness.
Sure. It gets old after a while.
Yeah, but it had its highest rating in the 7th year, and we were nominated for Best Dramatic Series, but we lost to Northern Exposure. It's okay.
Okay, speaking of children, I do want to give a shout out to the second storyline in the Storyteller with Vera's Soul, the Bajoran diplomat who Nog and Jake end up chasing after and competing over. We thought they all had amazing performances. You brought up some really great performances from all 3 of them, Sirach and Aaron and Gina Phillips, who played Vera's Soul. What was it like working with these younger actors?
I would have done that 24/7 because they have at that point, they have no filter. Aaron may have because he was older, but even he had this unbelievable innocence. He was the most innocent creature you can imagine. So that innocence and that lack of that adult filter, that's me. I want to be like that. So I fed off their energy. It was delightful to work with them. I wanted to try and capture that sense of awe and first love and all of those wonderful things they wrote in the episode. And a young girl thrown into having to pretend to be a great leader. And she's going to ball bust everybody. But you don't believe her for a second. She's a kid. Come on. Until she gets a life lesson. And seeing them together, I love the scene where they come to the door and they're arguing, and because neither one wants to push the doorbell, so she opens the door because she hears them out there. And then they just storm right in. And Sirach, I don't know if it was my direction or he did it himself. He puts his feet up on her desk, their coffee table, and we're just going to hang out. Well, okay, that's what they do. And would adults do that? No. If you had a highfalutin person come on the station, you're going to be bowing to them. You're not going to be putting your feet on their table. So that innocence permeated all of the scenes with them, and I found it delightful. And the scene where Nog throws the oatmeal on them and stuff, I mean, the antics that they had, delightful writing, and they all played the heck out of it.
Yeah, I think that sort of leads me to my next question. You've said in interview and also in this discussion today that Avery Brooks was very much the heart and soul of Deep Space Nine, and he does give just this incredible nuanced performance. But over our discussions on our podcast, we've sort of come to think of Jake and Nog as the heart of the show, at least on season 1. And we're just wondering, what do you think telling these kids' stories did for the tone of the show and the tone of life on the station?
Yeah, it humanized it.
Yeah.
I mean, Wesley Crusher as a character failed on The Next Generation.
Yes.
They failed. They didn't get it. Again, Gene wanted super people, and the kid was evolved, and it was not good.
Yeah.
They didn't do that with the kids. They were real kids.
They were allowed to be kids.
They were allowed to be kids. And that innocence added so much dimensionality to the show. And made it a much richer human experience. Ultimately, Deep Space Nine is about a dysfunctional family. And dysfunctional people also have kids. Look at the relationship between Nog and Rom. So that's revelatory to me, Lily, when you say that was the heart and soul, because as I think about it, I think you're right, because that really had an emotional underpinning to everything. So bravo on that. I agree.
Great. So on the podcast, we also have this thing that we call Best Friends Club, where we talk about all the great friendships on Star Trek in television and film. But in DS9, the best friends clubs that make the characters so much fun to be around And we did briefly talk about in the Storyteller, not knowing that Bashir and O'Brien were destined to be friends, but this is sort of the beginning of this friendship, this great friendship that exists. Can we ask you, what is your favorite friendship in Deep Space Nine?
I have to say Garrick and Odo because of the dynamic.
Good answer.
These are two people who are not in the preferred world. They're not among their own kind. And they are in positions of, I'll say, power or ability to affect the circumstances of what's going on that are all subtext. They're not reflective of what they really are and what they would really be doing, especially Garrick. After all, he's just a tailor.
A simple tailor.
And that dynamic and how these two outlier characters have this, again, love-hate relationship. To the point where one of them tortures the other. And yet they in some way resolve that relationship. So you have these outsiders peering in, but having integrated into the whole human community. I consider myself a loner. And they're the two ultimate loners on the show. And loners maybe seek in a perverted way some form of companionship, knowing that they are suffering because they're both suffering the same thing. Different circumstances, but they're both not in the situation that they would ideally like to be in.
They're such vulnerable characters, aren't they? And it does, throughout the series, they do both seem to be desperately seeking intimacy and companionship from people, but with no clear understanding of quite how to do that.
Exactly. Who are your two favorite?
Cole?
Well, I was Odo and Kira. I think that's a very controversial pairing in terms of where it went. And I'm not sure I personally believe how it turned into a romance. And conversely, there was a romance in a sense between Garrick and Bashir. And the way that turned out was almost more realistic because I think Garrick was desperate for some form of intimacy, but for all sorts of reasons, both on and off camera, it couldn't come to fruition with Bashir the way he wanted to. And maybe we as an audience, at least I wanted to see that go. And there was that sort of connection from a distance that it had to be throughout the whole series that made it heartbreaking and makes it maybe my favorite dynamic, Garrick and Bashir. Whereas Odo and Kira, I think, is also a beautiful friendship that maybe was taken to an unrealistic extreme, in my opinion.
No, that's great. Thank you for that. It's great to see these other perspectives and who resonates the most. So, Lily.
Okay, so we're deep in season 1 with the podcast, and one of my favorite relationships that's playing out is the Odo-Quark relationship. We've talked about some of the episodes, how at times their interactions feel like a romantic comedy, that they're sort of in this cat and mouse relationship, but also sharing the day-to-day intimacy of Odo every day being in the bar, always watching. There's a Stephen Sondheim song, Being Alive, and it kind of reminds me of their relationship. It's, you know, someone to crowd you and someone to stop you from sleeping. And I like to think of their relationship as this romantic comedy for a romance that never happens. But also I think we talk about how their relationship at times and the way it's, I guess, directed and written feels like film noir. It feels like Bogart. I just think there's so much to play with there, and maybe that's because of Armin Shimmerman and Renee.
I think that's
what they're bringing to it.
I think that's a great take. They are two diametrically opposed personalities, and that automatically creates this void, which they then are able to, in some way, mesh. But because they're so contrasting, it's funny to watch them together. I love doing the scenes with them because, you know, Odo's like this and Quark's always trying to figure out the angle, and that dynamic is great. So thank you both, because it's so cool to, I mean, how is this after 30 years, I'm sitting here doing this? It's crazy. You guys, you didn't see this when you were 2 years old, you know, when you were in the womb.
Well, thank you for thinking we're young. I mean, but I mean, Deep Space Nine is what made me fall in love with television. I was in middle school, and it was maybe 4th and 5th season, Deep Space Nine. I just fell head over heels and was obsessed as a little 13-year-old. And it's been... Wow. Whereas Lily, I had to convince her to watch it, and she's a newbie.
Yeah. I'm always late to the party on these things. So I came to Star Trek quite late in the game. So sort of like my late 20s, I started watching some Star Trek, and Cole and I had been friends for a few years, and he was always telling me you have to watch Deep Space Nine. And it always felt a bit unfamiliar compared to Next Generation, and everything you're saying makes total sense about why it felt that way. But I think as soon as I started to really properly watch it, it was mind-blowing. And I think we were talking about this, that the show feels so immediate for this present moment that we're in, you know, in the post-COVID, post-Trump, post-housing crisis, late stage capitalism. This show feels like something so important to be watching now. And I think maybe that's why.
How prescient were the writers?
Yeah.
And it's still resonating. It's quite extraordinary. I'm so grateful for the quality of the writing. And I can't think of another show that explored all these things, because there were so many ways you could tell a story. It wasn't LA Law. If you do LA Law, you'd have to, it's formulaic. This is how you do the show, and you have beginning, middle, and end, and it's there. This, throw caution to the wind. And the writers did do that. And the studio, I had to prepare the pattern budget every year. And every year I'd ask for more money. And every year they gave us more money, because it was the goose that laid the golden egg at the time. Mm-hmm. They knew they had something. But if you asked anybody, any of us back then, if any of us would be in this situation, and that we would still be going to conventions and talking on podcasts, I would have said, you're nuts. You're crazy. It's Star Trek. It's a goofy science fiction show. But it's not, because at its heart, it deals with the human condition in a multiplicity of ways, which it's pretty extraordinary. Deep Space Nine is not Star Trek. It's Deep Space Nine.
Agreed.
It's its own creature.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, speaking of prescient and immediate storytelling, there was that Deep Space Nine episode about the homeless crisis. Cisco travels back in time, and I believe it's actually to 2024, and witnesses just how awful the homeless crisis has become in the United States. And so here we are.
And David, here you are also doing what you can
for that cause in LA. Did you want to take a chance to tell us more about the photography project you've been doing and your work with the homeless crisis in LA?
My wife and I walk our dog a lot, and we go to Santa Monica and walk along the Pacific Palisades, overlooking the ocean and the Santa Monica Pier. And I'm a professional photographer now, but I hadn't been doing my personal photography for years because I was so wrapped up in my job. And in 2019, I decided to do personal photography again. And I shot on my iPhone, which is the greatest photographic instrument ever invented. And I'm a street photographer as my personal work. And nothing is better to shoot street photography with than an iPhone, because of its intimacy and its smallness, and it's not in your face, and a multiplicity of reasons. So we're on our walks, and I'm taking all these pictures. I'm going nuts with it. Then I'd come home and I'd edit and look at the photos. And invariably, the vast majority of the photos were of homeless people. And I said, wow, that's saying something to me. You knew it was there, but I started looking at it. So I said, that's what I'm going to do. For 6 months, I'm going to photograph these people. I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to try to know their stories and see what happens. So I got together all these photos, all shot on an iPhone, and I decided to have a couple of photo exhibits. And the response was so impactful because the photos resonated with people. I am all about color and saturation. So what I did with the photos is I made them super realistic. A lot of the homeless photos that you see are people black and white and very depressing. And it's, oh God, what I wanted to do was show that they're people just like us and that they can have lives as well. And I'm going to present them in the most positive, colorful, exuberant way that I can. That's what I did. Some people may have thought it was exploitative. The vast majority said, we get it. We see what it did was it drew your eye rather than force you away from the photos, which the black and white to me did. It drew them in so that they were forced to look. And that's what I was forced to do. I was forced to look and see. I have a lot of photographs of people walking by the homeless and not looking. And that was very disturbing. So the thing about the charity that I was involved in, John Billingsley, who played Phlox on Star Trek Enterprise, and I were friends. And he told me that he was involved with a charity that provides food for the homeless and the needy in Los Angeles. And I said, well, I have these photos. And he looked at me and said, let's partner. So they partnered with me on my exhibit. And subsequently, I became a member of the board of directors for 3 years, and I shot their video and stills for a couple of years. But I got burned out, and my 3 years were up at the board, and I didn't re-up because I'd given everything I could, and it is so daunting. And maybe it's a character flaw, but I couldn't do it anymore. My wife also has MS, and I want to devote as much time to her and to her cause as possible. So I had to kind of narrow my focus. But I'm still incredibly empathetic for these people. And I told little stories about them in the photos. And the biggest lesson I learned is that they're just like us. They just happen to live in a tent or sleep on a park bench. And a lot of them are drug addicted. A lot of them have profound mental illness, and a lot of them simply fell through the cracks. They were lower middle class, and something happened. They lost a job because of sickness and whatever else. And then COVID struck. We couldn't do in-person service anymore. It all had to be takeout. So that was an incredibly trying time for everybody, but it certainly had a huge impact on the homeless community because a lot of the services and the ability to access care and stuff were truncated. Even though this charity I work with still would bring in the UCLA mobile clinic, and we had the Jules Stein Eye Clinic that would come, and social workers and people trying to get them their payments from the government and stuff, because if you don't know your social security number, it's hard to get benefits. So all of that, it became so intractable for me that I had to back away. That's kind of a downer, but you asked.
No, thank you. I was looking at some of the photos in the photo exhibit, and they're so vibrant and they're so colorful and they're full of life, which I think is exactly the name of the exhibit is Still Lives, I believe.
Still Lives, yeah.
Yeah, I love the name, but it's showing just the intensity of that life, which is exactly what you're trying to show. So,
and that they're human, they're living lives, and there is a stillness about them that is very heart-wrenching, but they're still there. They're trying to survive, just like all of us, but their given circumstances are really, it's tough.
And look, I think it's clear from what we've talked about, this is a theme that resonates throughout your entire body of work as a creative person. The idea of people just trying to survive, particularly on Deep Space Nine, people who aren't at the top of the power structure, who are traumatized, who, have mental illness or have issues within their family or...
Look what happened with Bashir. Do you know what happens to him?
Totally.
I mean, what an issue to put on yourself that you are damaged in the opposite way. You're damaged because your parents could not accept you as you were, and they took the risk of improving you, but there's something about it that is wrong, and yet it's so right. So that's Deep Space Nine. It can be right and wrong in the same instance. You can love and hate.
That was another episode you directed, Dr. Bashir, I presume.
Yeah, and it was one of the lesser episodes, but what the topic was and the emotion in it, the mother doesn't say anything through the whole thing until she comes up and confesses that she's really the one that drove the whole change to genetically modify him so he was smarter. That scene where she comes up and tells him is the best scene in the episode, in my opinion, and wonderfully written. And the actress who played that part is not an actor. She's a college professor.
Yeah.
And she had done community theater. And she came in, I think it was one shot I did. She came in and nailed it. I was blown away. Here's an amateur. Go back and look at that scene. You're going, whoa, it's Meryl Streep.
How did they find her?
I don't remember the casting. I got to believe she came in red, because I can't believe we would cast that kind of pivotal character without reading her. So we must have seen her, but I have no recollection. But she also had a scene to play. Even if you're an amateur, if it's on the page and you have what's inside, go for it. And she was just brilliant. It's a heart-rending confession to your son that you didn't accept him for who he was, and you changed him for what you considered his benefit. If that's not Deep Space Nine in a nutshell, then nothing is.
Honestly.
Devastating. Yeah, I think I want to say just thank you so much, David, for these incredibly high stakes of the seemingly low stakes emotional stories that you managed to tell in the series.
Well, you don't know what a pleasure it is to speak to people who look at the shows through a critical eye and not as a goofy science fiction show, which when you talk to people, you get typecast. I was typecast as a sci-fi director, and that's, I can't do anything else. And I accepted that. Okay. But to have people who have critical thinking about the subject matter and appreciate the dramatic presentation is unbelievably gratifying. And I do this as an ego boost because I love hearing the acceptance and the community that you and your ilk are. So thank you.
Well, you know what? Just for the record, to prove that this is not an exercise in flattery. We're not just flattering you, because next season we will be discussing Rivals. And I will be honest about my opinion of it.
Well, it won't be any worse than mine. And then there's the Major's show. What was it called?
The Muse.
The Muse Rivals. The Muse is the worst. Is the worst thing that I ever had to work on. And the reason is it was a writer's conceit. I'm a writer going to write an episode of television about how hard it is to be a writer and what it's like. What could be more boring and insidiously empty?
Yeah, it was indulgent.
Self-indulgent. And they forced that on me. When I read it, I went, I'm doomed.
Do I have to?
And it was horrific and I love Major and she did a great job, but still Major and Odo, I mean, oh God. Oh, wow.
You know what? I bet when Lily and I get to it, we will dig under the surface and find some beautiful kernels of human truth in it. And I can't wait. So
good. Email me when you find them.
Yeah. Well, heck, this has been so much fun. Talking with you has been so much fun. We would love to have you back to tell us more about some of these upcoming episodes. It's been a true delight.
Well, you guys are great. So thank you for the invitation. And I got a big kick out of it. So thank you both. And if you want me back, I'd be privileged because you guys, you know your stuff, and it's greatly appreciated to hear your thoughts. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, we definitely want you back.
Absolutely.
So we'll stay in touch.
Okay. How do I say goodbye?
We usually just say bye.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye.